A successful playwright marries an actor who she once turned down for a role in one of her plays. But is the role of being her husband just another act disguising more sinister motives? That's the premise behind the 1952 thriller Sudden Fear, starring Joan Crawford and Jack Palance. And it's the movie we're uncovering this week on Movie Bones.
You want to talk about those second act changes now?
I think we ought to talk about this actor first. He has to be the kind of charm boy that makes every woman in the audience sit right up and go, I've watched him from every section of this theater. And I'm sorry, but he's just not right for the part.
And I hate to break the news to Blaine.
Well, tell him the truth. Make me the heavy. Say I exercise the dramatist's privilege of cast approval.
That's the voice of Myra Hudson, soon to be Myra Blaine, played by Joan Crawford. She's a wealthy heiress and successful playwright who seems to have it all. The man she's talking about is Lester Blaine, an actor auditioning for the part of the lead in her new play. Now, I'd ordinarily disagree with Myra's rather superficial judgment of what constitutes a proper romantic leading man's presence on stage, but then I see it's Jack Palance she's talking about, and there's no movie I can think of he's been where he hasn't played the heavy, so maybe she's right in this one particular case. Overall wrong, but maybe right in this one particular case. You know?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there, I guess. I don't really know much. I think we've watched a movie with him before, haven't we?
I'm not so sure. If it was, it must have been a smaller role. But Jack Palance, for me, is like, his face just reminds me of a skull. And,
yes.
And I used to think that it was just, when I saw him as an older actor when he was in City Slickers, which is in the 80s, which you imagine like the time differential between this movie and that. But no, it's like going back to his younger, roles. I'm looking like that guy always had a head like a skull. Not just that he has a skull. No, that's like, it's like Skeletor, Where do you start in a movie like this? Where do you start?
Where do I start?
Where do you want? Where do you want to start? Really?
Let's see. Where do I want to start? I've been trying to actually think about this. I guess I'll begin with the plot itself. Like I understand the plot. I mean, I feel like it's a pretty straightforward plot, to be honest with you. But this is one of those movies where there's a lot of times, especially one big time, that I'm sitting there going, you're only doing this because the plot demands that you do this. And by that, I mean, you have to do this for the movie to stay going forward.
Does it have to do with a record by any chance?
Yes, absolutely.
Because you and I had the same thought,
Yeah. That was my big thing watching the movie. When that whole record thing happened, I was like, why would you not immediately go to the cops?
Exactly. And as a writer, it's like, I got to be thinking as a writer, it's like, there's an easy way around this. If you don't create a written record of this thing that's physical, that can be transferred, easily used as evidence, then you don't have to worry about destroying it so that she's forced to have to act on her own, right? The only reason she does what she does, which is the most interesting part of the movie, is that the movie takes away the one thing it gives her as evidence of what she needs to do, or at least what needs to happen, a change in attitude towards her husband. Because spoiler alert, folks. He's a murderous psychopath that she ends up marrying, and as kind of like revenge. It starts out as revenge, but it works towards like greed as well. I have more to say about that as well. But the fact that they gave her a physical object that could be used, it's like, this is the big turning moment. And all she had to do was hear it. It didn't have to be like from a record, right? She just had to know it by some means. Mm-hmm.
And like, that would have been like easy to do with like something like, just walking, being like outside of the door when overhearing a conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Everything. So that was like my big thing with this movie. Like I was sitting there and I don't usually do that when I look at movies, but I'm sitting there thinking to myself, why aren't you just going to the cops? Like I even understand some of the I wouldn't say reaction, but like some of the hysterics, some of the depression, some of that kind of state that she's in. I get it. I get that, and I'm sympathetic to the plot for that. Still, however, Like, I think even most people in that kind of state would sit there and go, okay, I'm going to leave this right here, and I'm going to, like, go to the phone real quick.
At the very least,
Yeah.
at the very least, I think you wouldn't lose complete motor control.
Most people wouldn't, and it would just be like but I get it. The movie would be over.
Yeah. At that point, the movie would be over. And what's extra kind of, infuriating about that point, we're going to go on for this for a while, folks, is that the movie actually announces what's going to happen with the record, because it pretty much does. Because whenever it's like the Chekhov's gun, right? In this case, Chekhov's gun is this automatic recording device that's in her studio, which seems to be pretty, ahead of its time for considering the era, the decade you're in. She tells her husband, or who will be her husband, before too long, about this recording device where she just gets to dictate her stories, her screenplays, into this machine that records them on a disc. And the only reason you know that this is going to become important is because he's going to be lying about this, and it's going to become important to the plot. That's the only reason. And it obviates itself by saying you could have just had her listen in on the conversation. So you wasted screen time, and you kind of had this extra awkward thing to do that draws attention that draws you out of the movie, basically, for that moment.
Yeah, you see, like, I kind of thought this movie would go a couple different ways prior to this moment. I want to make that very clear. Like, I kind of thought we'd get more of like a gaslighting type movie. And what I mean by that, I'm talking about the actual movie Gaslight.
Yeah.
I thought we would get something along those lines where, like, he just kind of slowly but surely tears her down. Like, I mean, they kind of started setting that up perfectly, if you ask me, right after they started really getting heavy into each other. He's moved there, and then she's like, okay, I'm going to throw you a party. And then he doesn't show up for the party.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is going to be perfect. This is going to be a slow descent into madness. He's going to do things that are going to be very questionable. But then, I don't know, they introduce this other woman, and then it just kind of goes into a, murder plot style movie, which I'm not saying it's bad, but I was just kind of like, you could have done better. And then you've got that whole what is it called? What's the actual thing called? Do you remember the device?
Oh no, I don't remember. I don't remember what they called it.
You've got that whole
it's a recorder
yeah.
that uses, instead of using tape, because it's too early for tape in history, it's actually a record machine.
Yeah.
It's actually making a record on the spot, just based on if someone's talking in the room. And that picks up, of course, Lester's conversation and everything. But I hear what you're saying, because in the beginning, I was watching this progress. It's like he wants to get revenge on her for not picking him. So here's what I would think in this case, it would be the perfect thing to do, is if you're trying to get her back for that, you prove to her just how well you can act by acting as her boyfriend, then her fiance, then her spouse. And then you can pull the rug out on her. And if you're lucky, maybe you can, get her to sign over a lot of her wealth, or her material wealth. And in that case, leave her flat, and just kind of leave her flat. And that would be devastating, right? But instead of, and on top of that, there's even a way you could have worked this in. It's like, I was thinking about this a little further. It's like, in the beginning, the whole reason why, and it has to do with what we heard her say in the beginning of the show, is that she's kind of got this a little bit highfalutin attitude about, when he was giving his performance, she didn't know he was a psychopath, but it was a really good performance. And I thought, hey, he's doing a good job. And the reasons she was giving they felt like privileged. She comes from not just, a successful playwriting career, but she's also an heiress. She's got all this money, so it feels like she's got this very privileged role, and that it's affecting her capacity to see things a little more groundedly. And if by the end of the movie, possibly, if Lester had gone the way that I thought it was going to go, then I thought maybe he could leave her maybe with nothing, but she could have a better perspective on life, along those lines. It would be less of a thriller and more of a psychological drama. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. And I think the issue is the fact that this is a noir movie.
Yes, it is.
And it has they do follow certain formulas. Now, the formula being, the femme fatale.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big reason why it went the direction it did, is because you need that female in the movie that is not good.
Is it the second woman? Now we're talking about the second woman, Irene, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, like, they needed to bring her in. Of course, an easy fix to that wouldn't have been a love story, just two people going at it for whatever reason. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do with this, and it would have, I think, worked better. And again, that's not to say, because, like, I have a thought about what this movie is trying to do, but, it's like we've done before in the past where we're looking at a movie and going, this movie has the potential, but it does not fully meet its potential.
And I will say that one of the better parts of the movie I did like, it happens, and one of the things that separates it out from movies like Gaslight, imagine like Gaslight if, the heroine, she catches on to what's going on like midstream, but she can't get away from it, They do this great thing where they're almost like doing an actor's duel. They're both trying to withhold their actual genuine thoughts from each other and their actual plans from each other. And it's like, this is actually interesting. It's going back and forth. You got this cat and mouse game that's going on completely behind a curtain, and that's really interesting. It's like, and it also sets up Joan Crawford's character. And this is going to get to something that's one of my bigger pet peeves of the movie, is that they set her up as someone who's very capable but she's capable and she's got this plan that she's going through one step at a time. And then the movie takes that all away from her at the end. It flips a switch on her character so that she has to become the 50s, this helpless 50s housewife character almost. And look at the gun that she's about to use to kill Lester at the end, right? And say, I don't know if I can do this. No, she actually freaks out, panics, and drops the gun. Kind of like how she dropped the record, And it's like, why would you? It's like, look, you're about to be in serious danger. You've brought this scenario to the point where Lester's going to be showing up. This is the part of the plan where you shoot him and frame Irene, and you're freaking out, but this is going to be dangerous. Why didn't you at least keep the gun? Because you might need that for self-defense. He wants to kill you.
Yeah. So what I think the movie is trying to do, and this is the point that I was going to make. This is what I think it's trying to do. I think it's trying to make a commentary on morality and humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And, that kind of, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be moral or morally upright? Yes, she's not a perfect person. Obviously, we could maybe dive into that if we need to. Probably don't really need to. But, if she did that, kind of like, I'm going to equate it to something else. Gosh, I've used this so many times that I'm going to use it again. It's like the whole motive behind, why does Batman not kill? Because if I kill, I'll be just like them. And just like, I'll be just like the Joker. I won't stop. Same thing here, in a sense. If I do this, then I'm really no better than them. And that's what I think it's trying to do. But no, I do agree. Like, that's the thing. I agree with your point that it's like, okay, that's awesome. You don't want to be morally bankrupt and get them before they get you. However, you have done something not smart. And I don't even know, honestly, I don't even know if that particular part works for the plot. Because I thought maybe what would happen, again, we talked about Chekhov's gun. The gun went off in the dream.
Yes.
But, they introduced the gun, and the gun's never actually used. Which, yes, you can, pull the rug out from underneath you on that. However, when he finds the gun, he thinks that, I don't even know what he's thinking, to be honest with you. He just tries to find Irene and can't find her, and then, has a come apart because of it.
Not only is the gun not used, but even Myra herself ends up not playing a role in the final scene, really. When Lester is actually defeated, it's entirely of his own doing. It's his own mistaking of Irene, who's wearing the same thing as Myra is, confusing her, trying to run her over and crashing into her, and both he and Irene, die in the accident. And I was confused by this too. Myra is actually shouting to save them, even though she is prepared to kill them a few moments before, or have one killed and the other one sent to the electric chair, basically killing them both. And here she is, having not just I understand a pang of conscience, but these people are trying to kill you. It's a huge emotional shift, first of all, but then she has nothing to do with the resolution of the film. It's all as if this movie was a tragic story, of someone who had too much success and then, and immolated on themselves, except this is not a tragedy. This is a thriller with a killer who's out to get a woman, and the woman who's the victim should have at least something to do. You know what I'm saying?
But again, I think that goes back to what the movie's doing with this whole noir setting. But, with noir, like sometimes the idea is like, is that femme fatale character. Again, meaning that like, does not mean that the female character who is put into play in a movie or a story like this is going to lead to death or someone's death. It just means that often they're a harbinger of bad luck, of just, the defeatist attitude of what noir is. And they can lead to either someone dying or, just the ending being poor for whoever is most entrenched in that character.
So like in this case, Lester.
Yes. And so Lester, it made sense that Irene would be the cause of his death in that sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of thought as I was watching the movie, I was like, maybe they're both, like Myra and Irene are supposed to be like this whole femme fatale character, but Myra's our main character. Like, she's our heroine, she's our protagonist, she's our main character. I don't know if they were trying to do that, but I thought maybe you could do it, but she's still not that, like, she's not really mysterious. She's the victim in all of this. She's not pulling any strings until she's like, except for like maybe 30 minutes of the movie, where she's pulling any strings, and she's not really even pulling too many strings. She's just really messing with them, and she doesn't really push enough to where I think I'm about to get on another track. Now, like I'm saying, it's just she doesn't do that stuff. So it's like I would not categorize her as that, that femme fatale character. I don't know. It would have been better maybe if, again, they started to distrust each other more. Those two were always on the same page.
Yeah.
Until the end. That was another issue. But like, if she could have like done something to where they're both distrusting each other, or she has her own husband or boyfriend, if maybe he would have been more of a character in this movie other than just he's there. It comes down to there's just so much here that you can mess with. You know whose hands this movie should have been in?
Who's that?
I'm pretty sure he was alive still, but like, imagine this movie in the hands of one Alfred Hitchcock.
But you're not wrong at all. I actually imagined, Hitchcock doing a version of this. I did notice there were some shots that were very Hitchcockian in that sense. So yeah, it's doing a lot of the noir stuff. It's doing a lot of the Hitchcock stuff. There's a good thriller in here, or there's a good psychological drama in here, but it's doing both, and it's not blending them well. But that's one of the best ways I can kind of put it there. And ultimately the ending is, like I said, it's rather unsatisfying. If you're trying to hit the marks, like I said, it's trying to do certain noir things by hitting certain marks, like the femme fatale. But if you're only doing them for that reason, then you're gonna end up having a story that suffers. You know what I'm saying? What's your verdict going to be, man?
For those of you out there, you might think I'm coming down hard on this movie. I'm not. I do think this movie has a lot to offer. And again, it's an Oscar-nominated movie. That might be in and of itself to check it out. There's still a lot of issues that I have with it, ultimately at the end of the day. But I'm not going to tell you not to look at it. I do think there are some good parts to it that you might just see it just for yourself. But I'm going to give it a bad dates. And then after that, just, very much, I think, a one and done. I don't really see myself going back after this movie afterwards. But I don't see it as a thriller either. That's maybe another issue that I'm having with the movie, but bad dates. If you found it free, if you're wanting to watch a thriller of sorts, go watch this movie.
Watch it. If you want to watch it, it's good for a watch. And only free. Like I said, it makes me wish there was a better version of this somewhere, Yeah. And maybe it's like, but I could see someone taking this and being inspired by it to make a better movie out of it. Nowadays, it's a confused and inconsistent film. There's parts with it, and
it's trying to tell you something, and it puts the effort in, but it falls flat.
Yeah, it does.
But the fact that it's actually trying to tell you something, I think is worth it enough.
I think so. I think you're right.
At least just for one time. But of course, if you have to pick between that and maybe some other movie that is really good that you've watched before, I don't know, pick the movie that you watched before. Oh, there's one more thing before I wanted to make fun of this film on one aspect, and that is dude is just carrying around, or the other girl, one of those two people is just carrying around a bottle that just says poison on it.
I know. It had the skull and cross. Didn't it have the skull and crossbones too?
Yeah, it's something like that. And it's just kind of like, really? I mean,
you're like, Bugs Bunny, come on,
Yeah, that felt very cartoonish.
Yeah. Anyway, folks, now's the time when we like to remind the listening audience out there that if you're watching these movies alongside us, and you should be, and hearing our reactions, please do like, subscribe, comment, and of course, follow us on your podcast purveyor of choice. Tell us if you think we got it all wrong. Maybe nominate some films you'd like us to see do, especially if they're for free, because this adventure comes with no strings attached, guaranteed. In any case, Ryan and I thank you for sticking with us on this shared journey. And as the journey continues, Ryan, what are we doing next week?
Next week, we are going to see if Joan Crawford can actually bat one for two for us. Because I've only seen her in one other movie. This is the movie. I hope this movie is a better movie. We are watching a movie that is starring Joan Crawford, Lucy Marlowe, and Barry Sullivan. That name sounds familiar. But anyways, this is what Tubi says. Again, remember, it could be that it's not so correct. But Tubi says this is a naive working-class Chicagoan enters a world of bitter jealousy and manipulative power plays when invited to Atlanta by her socialite elder cousin. This movie is titled Queen
Bee. And I think I'm going to get a pretty good idea of Joan Crawford's acting style, and whether or not this is today's an either aberrant, thing in her resume, or if it's just more along the lines of maybe it's just her acting style I'm not a huge fan of. But we'll see as time goes on, because it looks like we're going to get a double dose here. So anyway, folks, that's about it. I can't think of anything else to say. So I guess I'll see you next week, Ryan. And you got anything else to say to the folks?
Have a good one. Go watch the film.
Yeah. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye, folks.